he graduated from high school. He wants to re-enlist in the Marines next year. However, he has to choose between the love for his country or the love for his mom and come back home and take care of his mom. So not only is this impacting me on a personal level, it's impacting the people around us that have built their life around me. I've been in this country for so long, and to think that you can just remove an individual who United States citizens have built their lives around would not cause hardship on other people around them, it's just disheartening.
Okay. Mr. Reichland Melnick, could you go through just one more time the statistics, and then I'm out of time here, on if the focus was on enforcement, you know, as well as the border and going after the people that we know have criminal records here, just that kind of money we'd be talking about if we wanted to focus our efforts on that group, as well as I would add to that, it's also going to be more border protection, which we know we need.
Yes, Senator. So we estimate that on average, a single deportation costs the U.S. government in today's money slightly under $24,000. So if we're looking at deporting 13 million people, that adds up to hundreds of
I'm actually
billions.
trying to get us to a solution that might work here. I remember when you were talking to Senator Durbin, and you talked about if you focused on the group that we know have criminal records that are still out there, how that kind of cost and what that would be.
I have to run the exact numbers for you, or I'm happy to get those for you, but it is substantially less expensive than what President Trump has repeatedly said he would do, which is aim to deport every single person here, regardless of whether they have a conviction or not.
Okay, but so if we could get that and follow up later, because I think that there'd be some widespread agreement that if we're going to start somewhere, for one thing, we must begin with these most serious offenders that are out there and get the money set aside for that. Do more at the border, try to do something positive here with dreamers and people that are contributing so greatly to our economy, and trying to figure this out. We have tried this several times and had agreements with Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. Not everyone on the left, right, not everyone, but I'm just hoping we can get to a place like that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Arthur, you are with the Center for Immigration Studies, is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
And that's a nonpartisan think tank, is it?
It is, sir.
Okay. The border is an open, bleeding wound, isn't it?
That's a fair way to characterize what's been going on for the last 4 years, sir.
The southern border is chaotic by design, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I've been covering the border for 3 decades, and yeah, it's pretty chaotic.
Would it be fair to say that the broken southern border is man-made?
It would be fair to say that, sir, based on policies that have been implemented.
And that man's name is Joe Biden, isn't it?
That would be a fair assessment, yes, Senator.
Under President Biden, if you wait in line for legal immigration, you're a chump, aren't you?
When you look at the benefits that have been given to people and the speed at which they've been released into the United States, I would be chagrined if I were waiting.
You're a chump, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
General.
Yes,
You
sir.
believe in open borders, don't you?
I believe in the rule of law, sir.
Right. And it makes you angry that President Trump does not believe in open borders, doesn't it?
Senator, I'm not here to discuss immigration policy. I'm here to discuss whether or not we use the military to enforce it.
And it makes you angry that most Americans don't believe in open borders, doesn't it?
Not in the slightest, sir. Again, I am not here to discuss immigration policy.
Yeah. Duty, honor, respect, you talked about that
Yes,
in
Senator.
your opening statement. On October 14th of this year, you went on CNN I want to read you what you said. Make sure I'm accurate. Here's what you said. President Trump is not like any sane leader. I'm very proud of General Milley for saying that President Trump is a total fascist. To Bob Woodward, if he as chairman of the Joint Chiefs is calling the president a fascist, I'm so proud of him for breaking that barrier. The challenge MAGA Republicans, they don't understand what fascism is. The reality is that they are in fact fascists themselves. Did I read that accurate?
Senator, I am happy to discuss my personal perspectives with you separately at any time. That's not the purpose of the hearing today.
Did I read that accurately?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. You think you're smarter than the American people, don't you?
Absolutely not, Senator. I am here to discuss the use of the military as part of this mass deportation.
You think you're more virtuous than the American people, don't you, General?
Senator, I am insulted by your comment.
Duty, honor, and respect. You talked about that in your opening statement, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Moran said, I wrote down her words. She said, by their actions, you know what someone's character is like. You agree with that?
Senator, for 35 years, I served my country with absolute honor and distinction, and I will continue to do so.
You agree with what Ms. Moran said?
Of course.
Mr., we've got a few minutes left.
23 seconds.
Well, actually, you let Ms. Klobuchar go well over, so I'm assuming you'll extend me the
I'll
same.
give you the same minute I gave to her.
You gave it a minute 20. I timed it.
You're using.
I watch you like a hawk, Dick. Mr. Melnick, Mr. Reichlin Melnick, you believe in open borders too, don't you?
I do not, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay. On November 1st, 2022, you tweeted, both Texas and Louisiana have their knives out for black immigrants. Do you remember that tweet?
I don't, but it's quite possible.
What Texans, it's not only possible, it happened. You're not denying it, are you?
No, I'm saying, referring to the
Texans?
context.
Who are
I
you
actually
talking
don't
to?
know the
Who
context.
are you talking to about who in Texas had their knives out for black immigrants?
Guessing the context, but my suspicion is
Give
that
me
it
a
has to
name.
do the
Give me a
Attorney
name.
General Ken Paxton and
Give
the
me a
Attorney
name.
General of
Give me a
Louisiana.
name.
I just did.
You don't have a name, do you?
I just said Ken Paxton.
You don't have a name, do you? You just said
I
it, didn't
just said Ken Paxton.
you? All right, how about Louisiana? You said Louisiana has its knives out for black immigrants. Who in Louisiana were you talking about?
Again, I'm not certain. That was 2 years ago, and as I'm sure you know, much has happened in the last 2 years.
Well, did you say it?
Again, I do not remember the context,
But you don't.
Senator
You
Kennedy.
said somebody had their knives out from Louisiana for black immigrants, but you don't know who they were? You just said it?
I said the Attorney General of Louisiana and Texas, and I believe this referred to specifically lawsuits brought and arguments that were made in court that the arrival of Haitians
I'm out
and
of time,
others
but I
were
want to get you
inherently
on the
dangerous,
record.
which was
You
not.
Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate
Believe that the
your
Attorney
questions.
General at that time of Louisiana had his knives out for black immigrants. That's your testimony.
Given their
Thank you, Senator
litigation
Kennedy.
conduct, yes.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a broken immigration system. This was acknowledged over a decade ago when I first arrived in the United States Senate. And we actually, in 2013, we had a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill that addressed the issues of all of the immigrants who are working in various large sectors of our economy, i.e. in the ag sector, where the Chamber of Commerce are concerned about what we're doing with immigration policy, where we dealt with the undocumented immigrants who are working and paying taxes for which they get absolutely, they're paying the Social Security, Medicare, they don't get those benefits at all. So we have a broken immigration system. We actually had the two senators who are sitting here, the chairman and the former chair of the committee, who are part of a comprehensive immigration reform. So I don't know why we cannot come to some sort of an agreement to deal with the massive, complex issues that confront us. So that is what I'm calling for. Until we make a commitment to comprehensive immigration reform, pointing fingers at the Biden administration or any other administration is not going to get us for anywhere fast. And in fact, every administration has had border enforcement policies. You may not like the policies. For example, I certainly didn't support the Trump policy of separating thousands of children from their parents without keeping track of who their parents were. All I'm asking for is a rational, reasonable, humane immigration policy. So that was what I thought the comprehensive immigration bill in 2013 was. I didn't agree with all of the provisions, but some of us worked really hard on it, and Senator Graham, as I mentioned, was part of that. So that's what I think we ought to be focusing on. Now, General Manner, I'm glad you're here because we have a president who has said many times that he intends to use the military to do immigration policies, to effect his immigration policies. And General Manner, you said that that is going to have a very negative impact on readiness, for example, because our military, including the National Guard, they are not trained for immigration enforcement. So as the chair currently of the Armed Services Committee's Readiness Subcommittee, I share your concerns. By the way, maybe you can go over again a little bit more. What kind of infrastructure would be needed to enforce immigration deportation on up to 4% of our population? What kind of infrastructure would we need in order to effect that?
I have to defer to the other experts on the panel.
Okay, well, then that would be Mr. Ragnick-Melnick. Am I
Yes.
pronouncing your name? Would you like to go into some of that?
Senator, in order to carry out that form of operation would require hiring tens of thousands of new law enforcement agents, would require building dozens, if not hundreds of new detention centers, hiring thousands of new judges, all at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially up to or more than $1 trillion over the course of more than a decade.
Do you support comprehensive immigration reform?
I do.
Does anybody on this panel not support comprehensive immigration reform that really gets to some of the problem, well, that really addresses the issues that we're facing? Anybody on the panel?
Senator, I have to say, comprehensive immigration reform is not a defined term, and as with all
Well, you
legislation,
can
the
look
devil's in
at,
the detail.
excuse me, you can look at the 2013 bill, and that had some of the kinds of, that would be what I would describe as comprehensive. It was not the answer, it is not the be-all and end-all, but it was pretty comprehensive, wouldn't you say?
I was actually on the bench at the time that bill was introduced. I was an immigration judge and not involved in legislation.
Well, it was, trust me when I say that, it was about as comprehensive immigration reform as we have managed to do in over a decade at this point. And that's more, I think, what we need to do. And I don't think there's anybody here who supports something called the open borders, because as I said, every single administration has had border enforcement policy. You may not agree with all of that. I don't think there's anybody sitting here who supports open borders, whatever the heck that means. But we all know that we need to have border control. We do need to, need that. But what are we going to do about the 11 million to 13 million undocumented people here who are very much a part of our community and the fabric of many, many communities, not to mention that there are U.S. citizens that are part of their families? And are we going to start busting them up? What's that going to do? So, before we start throwing out all kinds of so-called solutions, I think we need to think about what are we going to do to have a rational, reasonable immigration policy, and that's what I'm calling for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for being here today. Ms. Morin, I am so sorry for your loss. I know that's been a very difficult time for you and your family, and this truly is a season of sorrow for you all, and I recognize that. I find it so interesting. This open border policy that we've seen is not a compassionate policy. I've talked to people that work with human trafficking and sex trafficking, and what is happening to women and children is abhorrent. And we all are fully aware of that. Mr. Chairman, I appreciated your remark that we should deport those that are truly a danger to Americans. I think that's accurate. I don't think there's anyone would disagree with that. We've all seen the uptick in violent crimes, such as Ms. Morin and her family have experienced. And this is the reason I reintroduced my CLEAR Act this year, which would enable local law enforcement, when they apprehend someone who's in the country illegally, to detain them and then call on ICE to deport them. And then the federal government have to repay that local law enforcement agency for what they've spent in that apprehension, that detention. And we should pass this bill today. And that would be a good thing for this committee to be doing this last week. Pull it up, put it on the hotline, and run it. Is there anybody on this panel that disagrees with deporting criminal illegal aliens? Raise your hand if you disagree with that. Everybody agrees those that have committed crimes against our citizens should be deported. Mr. Arthur, I want to come to you. Talk for just 1 minute about why it is important that we empower local law enforcement to carry out the job that the federal government has not done.
Well, you actually heard Mr. Reichlin-Melnick talk about how few ICE enforcement removal officers there are. There's always going to be a set number of those individuals. When you allow police officers who are involved in their community, who are the first line, actually putting hands on criminals, they're going to be the people who are best able to pull those individuals out of the community. And it's important to note, Senator, that when you talk about immigrant crime, Ms. Morin's situation is horrible, and every crime is horrible. So much of that immigrant crime takes place in immigrant communities. Sanctuary jurisdictions do nothing but punish the immigrants that those individuals that live in those communities that those criminals are sent back to. So that's why it's absolutely crucial.
I appreciate that. So I think we should move forward with my legislation, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reichlin-Melnick, I'd like to come to you. I want to talk about some of your tweets. You've been active on X. Here's one. This is bad analysis that bears little resemblance to the facts. The Remain in Mexico program was not very successful. It was a human rights disaster that fed people to the cartels with not much impact on border crossings. Plus, Biden ended it when it was barely in use at all. So
that's correct.
Let's talk about that. So do you still believe that Remain in Mexico was not very successful?
It wasn't. In fact, it was one of a suite of programs that went into effect in 2019, about 4 or 5 different ones over the course of about 8 months.
Do you believe it was a human rights disaster?
Yes, and I can tell you the stories of the women sent back by the United
May
States
I
to
please
Mexico
tell
who
you
were
stories
raped in
of
Mexico because of that.
people that were raped along the way, people that have been
And we sent them
trafficking,
back to those
and drug
traffickers.
dealers, and
Remain in
drug
Mexico
dealers.
gave
Okay.
people to the cartels, and we turned our eyes away from them.
Remain in Mexico was successful, and we all know it. Now, let me talk
It
to
was
you about
not.
another tweet that you put up. There are not 320,000 missing children.
That's
that
correct.
That number is a false interpretation of a DHS OIG report that said that 32,000 people who entered as unaccompanied children from 2019 to 2023 were ordered deported for missing court, and ICE failed to file charging documents for 291,000 more.
That's right.
Now,
That's an accurate description of the OIG report.
This is a human rights disaster because what we have heard is the DHS Inspector General, and what they have testified is that they found 32,000 migrant children did not show up for their court date, and an additional 291,000 migrant children never received notices to appear.
That's correct. That's what my tweet
So it
said.
isn't your testimony that DHS does in fact know the whereabouts of every single one of these 320,000 children, and they're just not telling people where these children are.
No, because that's not DHS's function here. It's also Office of Refugee Resettlement. It's
It is
not their job to
DHS
go out
and
and find every
ORR.
single people.
It is DHS and ORR.
I guess the
What
broader
we
point is
know,
somebody isn't missing
sir,
if no one's looking for them.
What we know is that through reports that have been made, reporting even the New York Times, many of these children are in abusive situations. They are working in plants, and indeed, DHS says that you've got this 320,000 migrant children that cannot be located. That is a human rights disaster. I yield back.
Senator Blackburn, they did not say they can't be located. They said that they had not even attempted to file
My time has
charging
expired. I
documents,
yield
which
back,
is a very
Mr.
different
Chairman.
thing.
I'm going to give the witness an opportunity to finish his remarks.
I just want to know, the DHS report did not say these children were missing. It said that ICE had failed on the job to actually start the court process for them. If ICE filed the court documents, many of those people would be living at the exact address that the ICE told them. It's just ICE has not filed the charging documents. It's not that they're missing. And of course, exploitation is very real, and we've called for more labor enforcement to ensure it doesn't happen.
Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the fact that we're still discussing, debating the struggle to reconnect children who were separated from their parents more than 4 years ago today should tell us a lot about what to expect in the next administration. I think it's worthy of further conversation, maybe a different hearing, a different day to focus on that. Just as a reminder for folks that are observing today's hearing, that the stated topic of today's hearing is, quote, how mass deportations will separate American families, harm our armed forces, and devastate our economy. So I will attempt through my questions to bring us back to the focus of this hearing today. But first, I wanted to point out a couple of notes that I've taken throughout the hearing. In hearing from my colleagues on the committee, the issues they've raised, the questions they've raised, to underscore a statement I made at the outset, which is how complex this conversation in this policy area is. And so it requires thoughtful and nuanced solutions. Senator Graham was talking about the numbers, and even questioned witnesses of would you be opposed to someone who has had their day in court, he said, and has been denied a further stay in the United States after having had their day in court. That sheds light on process, due process, often lack thereof, representation in the process, lack of representation in the process. I'm for a process and finality of a process, a finality, an answer, clarity about your future in a matter of weeks and months, not years and years, but that requires investment in the process by the federal government, in hearing officers, in immigration judges. So let's just lay that out if we're going to be genuine and serious about tackling the backlogs and the issues. Second, man, if I had a nickel for every time I heard fentanyl in this committee, serious problem, but irresponsible in how it's misportrayed so often in immigration conversations. Fentanyl needs to be addressed, fentanyl needs to be stopped. Its illegal importation needs to be tackled. But if we're going to do it thoughtfully and seriously, let's look at what the Customs and Border Protection Agency tells us. 80% of individuals who are prosecuted and convicted for bringing fentanyl into this country are United States citizens. Happy to share the link, folks. Happy to share the report. So if that's a concern, then let's address the heart of the concern and not just use it as a soundbite to further attack immigrants. Oh, by the way, did you know that the numbers at the southern border are way down? People talking about this crisis at the border, crisis. We always need to do more to ensure a safe, orderly, and humane border. But some of these numbers that are being tossed around are not what's happening today because of President Biden's policies this last year. So let's be intellectually honest with ourselves and the public. Now, that being said, Mr. Reichlin-Melnick, you're pretty popular today. I have a question for you as well. As you know, and you've referenced, the largest mass deportation effort in U.S. history was President Eisenhower's Operation Wetback. I referenced it in my opening statements. During that operation, more than 500,000 Mexicans and many United States citizens were deported. And as far as anybody can tell, Operation Wetback did not achieve its intended effects of increasing employment rates or wages for U.S. workers. Former President Trump has said that he planned to model his deportations on Operation Wetback. Now, you testified today about the expected negative economic impacts of mass deportation, including the rising costs of food. Some estimates say food prices are going to go up 19% based on this alone. In what world does food become cheaper with mass deportations?
Mass deportations would not cause food prices to become cheaper. The exact opposite would occur. In fact, a single worksite raid in 2018 under the Trump administration at a beef plant in Tennessee led to ground beef prices rising by 25 cents for the year that the plant was out of operation following the raid.
And just to follow up to that question, I'm cognizant of my time, Mr. Chairman. I've referenced so many industries that have significant percentages of undocumented workforce in them. I think chief among them is the agricultural industry, not just nationally, but particularly in the state like California, the largest agricultural producing state in the nation, where estimates are, well more than 75% of the workforce is undocumented. I hear from growers, as do all my colleagues. I hear from labor contractors, as do all my colleagues, about how easy it is for them to recruit United States citizens to do the work in the fields. And let me tell you how easy it is. It is not. There's a reason that the agricultural industry relies on immigrants, including so many undocumented immigrants, to help keep the food supply chain going, keep food on the tables of American families. And I invite my colleagues, if you want to get a taste of what it's like and the difficulties for the recruitment, to spend a day in the fields, like I did in 2022, picking radishes and parsley, like Senator Booker did in 2023. Happy to work with growers and farm workers